I'm so excited to have mentor circles back again at Life Works Well. It's been a while. I was thinking back to when I first started them, which was about April 2020, in response to the pandemic, and everybody was getting onto Zoom and just having a place to gather. And the first one I did was called Leadership, Layoffs, and Love. And we could probably use that again right now. Anyway, so a little bit of trivia for you. So I'm Helen Patterson. I'm the founder of Life Works Well. I am an HR professional at heart, former lawyer, reformed lawyer. Our company helps scaling organizations create healthy, high performance, and heart-centered cultures. And we do that in a number of ways, through our workshops, through our people strategy, through some of our facilitation, and really bringing the heart and soul back into people so they can better serve their organization, their community, and the world. And what a better time to think about humanity and our relationship with technology and tools, because my work has really been primarily on bringing the human back. So what is Helen Patterson doing? Embracing AI. So this is going to be a real fun talk. I'd love to have you introduce yourself in the chat. I see that there's a number of other people that joined. Feel free to turn on your video or not. Introduce yourself in the chat, where you're from. I just want to honor the land that I'm on in Toronto. Treaty 13, dish with one spoon. To me, it makes so much sense about circles and gathering and honoring Indigenous ways and the land that we're on. So share that with us. And also, if you have any questions, this is going to be interactive, but really you're here because you want to learn a little bit about how to embrace AI, how to bring them in as a team member, what's happening with the future of work, and how we can delegate with heart using AI. So I am just going to now introduce our speaker today, our guest. I am so excited to introduce Susan Diaz, who I met several years ago at a retreat in a business workshop weekend for entrepreneurs. And so that was back in 2018 or 19, I think. And we've watched each other evolve our businesses over the last several years. And she's the founder and CEO of peacefulaimarketing.com is her website. And she invites us as small business owners to consider 100 times scale factor in the art and age of artificial intelligence. She's an experienced speaker and trainer, and regularly engages with entrepreneurs and professionals, really to simplify generative AI. And I say, if I can do it with Susan's help, anybody can. But she's the author also of Unboring. And so when I first met Susan, it was really to look at marketing and other things. So I've loved how she is now embracing AI literacy. She has used to have the podcast 4 a.m. report, which I was honored to be a guest on at one point. And now she has another podcast, AI literacy for entrepreneurs. And so really it makes sense that we're evolving. And she also is involved in ABCDEI, which is unlearning bias. So I don't know how she does it all, because she's also a mom and has a teen and a beagle who's newer to the family. So I'm very, very appreciative of having Susan here today. And I'm just going to kick it off with a question. So first of all, I want to know a little bit of how you decided to get into this transformation and evolution into running now an AI agency. A little bit of your backstory for everyone so they get to know you a little bit better. And then I'm sure we're going to have lots of technical questions and a few others that I have as well. So thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me, Helen. Quick fun story there. Helen told you where we met, but the backstory is that we met because there was like a circle, like a closing circle, and she was right beside me, and the card that I drew from the deck had something that was deeply meaningful to me, and so I cried into her very pretty pale pink sweater with all my makeup, and then profusely apologized and offered to clean it. And then, that led to, so speaking of human moments, Helen, in the middle of all of the AI, there's a lot that keeps us human. So what led to the AI? I think a couple of things coming together at roughly the same time. Um, the first of it was that my business was starting to change shape a little bit after the pandemic. I think I sort of hung on to structures and kept team members, which I possibly couldn't afford for a bit longer than I should have in my service-based business model. And the time came to think about what's next and how I'm going to evolve my business. And then roughly at that time, like as if the universe is like, here, have a massive outlier to impact that decision. Here's generative AI. And I've always been a bit of I've been a bit of an early adopter of ideas and technology. I've been a tech ghostwriter for many years. I've always like run a virtual business even before the pandemic. So there were a lot of factors that made me be like, yeah, perhaps I do know what I'm talking about, and perhaps the fact that I'm not a technology founder doesn't have to hold me back. And at roughly that time was when people like you and several others said to me, hey, what do you think about this? And what do you think about that? And people were inviting my opinion on some of the developments, which was happening at like an incredible speed and continues to happen fast. And, I was like, okay, so I know the answer to that. So I'm going to give it to you. So, and then, yeah, one foot in front of the other. And here we are. I made a course a year ago. People started to take the course. I run a mastermind for AI implementation, and Helen's inside that mastermind. So yeah, a few things, just experimental. If anyone tells you they know all of the things at this point in AI's development, it's probably not true. And so just practicing the hours and getting to that level of being able to help other people come along on the journey.
That's amazing. And I think that here's the thing. If we're not embracing AI, we're going to get left behind. And I think that's in traditional workplaces and in the world of the gig economy. And so that's why I love this, because I am an entrepreneur, I'm a small business owner, and I work with a lot of small business owners, but I also am still very much engaged with the HR professionals that have to figure out what they're going to do with their talent. So hi Pam, it's such an exciting time to be able to look at keeping the human side and looking at how can we utilize the tools, which isn't new because technology, we've been kind of evolving tech, and Pam's an expert tech person. And I just find that, if you're not embracing it and upskilling and reskilling your organization or yourself, you will be maybe, a little stuck. And so we'll have a little bit of a mixed group because I look at how can organizations delegate with heart. And I say that because we do everything with heart here, but it's really being more mindful about how you're engaging your employees to and teams to actually think about how they can use the tools, right? So one of the things I wanted to sort of put out to whoever's here, but then we're going to get into some real examples, is like what are some of the top tools right now that you would recommend as a starting point, because everybody here might be at a different spot in their journey. So I was hoping everyone could put in the chat what tools they're using. Because think about it, we've already had applicant tracking systems. We already have chat bots as like when we're customer service. There has already been these large language models out there. And I think that now that it's just so much in the forefront that people have this fear a little bit. So I'm going to have people do that, but I'd love you, Susan, to kind of talk about what your top three recommendations are to as a starting point if you're going to be looking at utilizing artificial intelligence.
I like that question, and I get it a lot. It depends a little bit on your industry, obviously, but from a completely general perspective, I'd say a generalist large learning model, something like ChatGPT or Claude, or if you want to go into the Google universe, Gemini, one of those is probably a good place to start because there's so much of ideating and having that LLM function as your second brain that's possible inside of a tool like that. So that's always a good place to start, especially if you're like, if you're beginner to intermediate usage of it. And then on top of that, and I know you're a fan of this, Helen, I will preach it from the mountaintops forever. It's called perplexity.ai, and it's really quickly replaced Google for me. And the sort of the clear difference is that if you run a search, and we will continue to search, right? The active searching for information, precedes technology. It goes beyond books. It just, it's going to be the way we look for improvement and for info. So instead of giving you a bunch of links in answer to your search, it gives you an answer and tells you where that answer came from, and then it provides you like with sources. So I think that's going to make a big difference in the way in which we search. I think from a fact checking and journalistic perspective, it's huge because it simplifies the research involved. So definitely perplexity.ai. Some of the ways in which we use it as a marketing firm is to research information, because we create content for people in a lot of industries that we're not the subject matter expert. We're using subject matter expert material to, create stuff on their behalf. So like Perplexity is like quite huge. I think it simplifies the ability of like, if you have a larger reports and stuff that need finer sourcing. So yeah, quite a bit of a fan there. People, if you go and look for Perplexity, you'll find headlines like Google killer. I don't think Google will be killed, but I do think that it's NVIDIA and Jeff Bezos have already invested in Perplexity. And you'll probably see some change in what search looks like in the next few years. And so, yeah, so that's the second tool. The third one is an integrator tool. And again, it precedes the advent of generative AI or OpenAI's sort of hold of the market. And it's called Zapier. What they've done is that they have integrated AI really well into their workflows. Zapier to begin with was very much an if this, then that kind of tool where, you're like, in a traditional funnel, if someone does this, if this is the intent signal, then this is the output kind of thing, right? And so I think that's gone up the capabilities and the workflow possibilities and the degrees of automation have really, gone up hugely. They are an old favorite and we already pay for it, and that's why we stick with them. But there is another tool called make.com that does the same thing. And often the people who come second do it better, in my opinion. So it's worth checking out. And so what happens when you have these three tools is that you get to move away from doing single actions with you and the machine, and instead you get to move stuff around, right? And you get to, like, to your point, we've talked often about delegation, Helen, and briefing, and often automation. At least in the marketing space, people think of it as, oh, someone's going to write for you and then they're going to post for you and it's all going to happen without humans involved. That's not the level of automation that you're going to start with. You'd probably start with something smaller, like find me this information and send it to my inbox like once a day or something similar.
Yeah. And I think one of the things to keep in mind is that it can be overwhelming sometimes. I hopped on something, and this guy is a tech founder and like just amazing. And he sent out as a tool a list of like 100 different AI places to go. And I was like, oh my gosh, like forget it. was like, can you sort this by like what's video, but I just went to a couple, and I think that's the thing is you have to experiment a little bit. And I think that's why starting, like I really focused on Chat GPT to really, and I did pay for the upgraded version. And I don't know if it, some of you do follow me on LinkedIn, but I was having so much fun with it. I was like, hey, can you take a picture of me, put this into a cartoon and make it look like, something to do with heart. I think it was Kindness Day or something. And I was just laughing because I looked about, 30 years younger. And I was like, here's the picture of me so you can play around. And apparently I'm anti-aging. So there you go. But it's fun. And I think that that's the thing. And like, so for marketers, obviously they're into it because they're streamlining some of their processes. They're able to like do video clips with some of the tools. Amazing, amazing. And I will put a resource together as well. And I'll send it out to the participants. And I think Susan was going to put some of the names in, but you could get overwhelmed. So I think it's really just thinking about what are your needs and what are you trying to operationalize? And this kind of gets into that topic of delegate with heart, because even as a business owner, when you're thinking about when you first start out as a solopreneur, you're doing it all. I started out, I was doing my blog and putting it on the website and the MailChimp and the Canva posts. And I was like, okay, there's no way I can do this forever and continue to sell and continue to support my clients. So, having the ability to think about, well, what makes sense, but also looking at what your own skill set is, what's your zone of genius. I love when Susan talks about that too, from the Big Leap, and what lights you up, what can your team do? So Susan, would you mind kind of sharing, because we've talked about this a little bit in the marketing, in the mentor mastermind. I was just wondering about how for people here to think about it, because there's those that support teams and clients and then their own teams. What's the best way you think you can start to sort of think about the process of what I call delegate with heart? And I include AI companions. I forgot to turn on the AI companion on Zoom. I did it, but so there's a summary that'll happen. So that's a cool new tool with Zoom as well. The process we've talked about from, where to start, because it can be overwhelming. If you want to give any advice and how you went about deciding what tools, and then if anybody else wants to jump in, and I can kind of share what my process was.
Sure. I mean, and some of this, it's intimidating for me because I'm speaking to so many people right now. But I will say that you have to start at the top. You have to start with, vision, mission, values. You have to start with the goals of what you're trying to do. You have to have some sort of 1 to 3 year plan for what it is that your company is trying to do, right? Whether it's yourselves and what you're offering, or whether it's like how you're serving your clients. So there's a few things to think about. And I think if many of us are already sort of like entrepreneurs in the online space, and for us it's about looking at some of the things that are already in play, right? And I like to ask the question, like, what feels hard? Back to that reference of zone of genius from Gay Hendricks, and the 4 zones, which is incompetence, the stuff you find difficult and you shouldn't be doing at all, and then competence, the ones that you're okay at but perhaps it's not the best, and then excellence, and then genius. So I would say starting with things that are blocking the process, things that are taking way too long, anything that is repetitive, anything that can bring down like a service number. Like right now you're responding to people in 24 hours. Could you be responding to people in 12 hours, for example, just really starting to think outside of the technology into what you're trying to do, and then what feels difficult inside of that. And then I think starting to pick specific workflows, like not being tempted to do all of it at once, like be like, okay, if you're going to do stuff to do with like training, for example, or stuff to do with like if it's inside of marketing, stuff to do with the content you're creating, or the distribution. So you just really have to pick a specific play, and then start there. And then it'll give you learning, because I keep talking to people often about how like this stuff happens at like a quantum pace, right? I mean, improvements happen really quickly. Earlier, you had to do things for, months, maybe years before you could see some pattern and do things. Right now, the feedback's really quick. It's like you wanna increase training materials of some sort, like you can have that done in weeks. You can deliver a program in a month. There's lots. So that's what I invite you to think about, like the really big picture, and then the quick easy wins.
And there are a few HR professionals or people that support in the field of like team development, leadership development. And I think that that's what it is. It's taking a step back again. And what is it, what are the things I'm doing? Is there a way to operationalize this, simplify, get our standard operating procedures, create, create programs? People actually will and we'll get into prompts in a second, but people will actually think about, well, what's a workshop I want to work on? Can I brainstorm with my new team member, my AI team member? My AI team member's name is Inspira. So
I love
she
that.
helps inspire me. So often I'll brainstorm with her and we're kind of getting to know each other. And so it's a little bit of fun because, again, some people have a different attitude. They have a different management style, leadership style. But I'm like, I get more out of Inspira if I kind of like have a good relationship with her. But it really is about how you prompt as well. And I found though, I was going to design a landing page for something. And I thought, I couldn't believe how quickly I got an outline for it. And normally I would have been writing that by hand. And I'm a writer. And so for me, I still don't, that's things I love. So I don't want to necessarily give all of that to ChatGPT. And plus, everybody can tell whether someone's using it. If you look at the style of the LinkedIn posts and things like that, or blogs, you can generally tell. But it's okay. You've got to put your human touch on it and fact check and everything. But even to take a blog, and so thinking about all the functions you have in your teams, you can take a blog and then just say, hey, put this into a number of posts for me that I'm going to now post. And so there will be streamlining a lot. And that's one of the most important things to think about too, is for those who are supporting teams in their organizational structures, how is it going to change? Like we're in the knowledge worker era, and then we're in this different technology era. And so we already know that probably 70% of jobs have changed already. And so what's next? What are the next ones? So there's so much wrapped into that. So I just thought maybe we could kind of, if you're thinking about starting to use a couple of the tools that you mentioned, because I think a lot of people did want to know a little bit more practical, where can they go? Like you do a lot on prompts. I think you have a prompt library as well. And people have maybe have already been experimenting. But how would you get more success out of that relationship with ChatGPT? Like what are the tricks in a way that you can use?
There's one overall big sort of like, call it a hack, but it's really just, getting the machine to think for you. And that is to ask it to ask you questions. So regardless of what your project is that's on the table, you go in and you say, I'm doing ABC, and I want to get to this result. Ask me questions so that you can have all the information you need to be my assistant, or to be my deputy, or to give them a title if you like. So that's a really quick way to shift the ownership of the information from your head to the machine, because you're much more likely to answer questions. So for example, when you do that, I call it the master prompt, and I joke that hopefully one day, like 20 years in the future, when they look back and they talk about AI naming, hopefully my name will come up when they talk about this, because they go on and on about it. So when it asks you, it'll come back with 10 questions. Some of them might be basic, but it's helpful. Like think of it like a junior employee, one who's like a few levels down from you. And how would you break down the information? Something might seem obvious to you, but it's not obvious to that person, right? And so those questions really help you clarify it, and I think helps your own thinking, right? In just putting it down and then having that documented. The quickest hack here is to use some type of voice typing tool. ChatGPT itself has like the voice conversation, but there are limits on it right now. So I prefer to just use the typing box like they intended, but definitely create that somewhere else. So I would go into something simple like a Google Doc and use the voice typing feature and then speak, because I'm a podcaster and I guest often on people's properties. I find it just quite easy to speak out loud and hear my own voice. So that's the way that I refine the prompt. So this is what I say is the difference between prompting the machine and prompt engineering, where you're literally getting the machine to prompt itself, right? And if you use Claude from Anthropic, they actually do have that feature inside of it, even in the free one, which is called the prompt optimizer, where you go in and tell the tool what you're trying. I'm going to put that in the chat as well. What you're trying to do, and then ask it for the best prompt. Anthropic.
Yes. Amazing. I just tried, it's Claude, I think it's known as, right?
Yeah.
And I tried that too. And I know because one of our colleagues really, really prefers that for certain purposes. So I think that's where you do have to spend a bit of time experimenting to see what your needs are, what you like. Going back to Perplexity really quick. So for the people that are here, I know quite a few of you. I don't know everybody, but if you're doing research, especially when you are doing presentations or you're a speaker or you are writing blogs or even resources for your clients, I love the fact that Perplexity takes your topic and summarizes it. So instead of you doing it in Google and then you're going to 10 different sources and you're opening up the browser and where is it, it will actually bring it all in one. And then you can actually go look at the resource to make sure you like the source. So how I started using it, because well, Susan was telling me for months before I finally started it, and then when I did, I said, "Oh my gosh, why didn't I not do this before?" But because I'm writing a book right now, which is taking forever for those of you who know me, but it's coming, and I had used some stats and research and studies from a couple years ago. And so much has changed. So I wanted to update it so I make sure I have the current information. In hindsight, that's the problem about deciding to write a book. If you're referring to these things, you got to update it at some point. But it was fantastic because I would put in the search about the topic and it would bring up the latest. And I was like, okay, the stat that everybody had been using for years of 71% of Fortune 500 companies have mentor programs. Well, it went to 85 and now it's like closer to 90. And it's like, and then it gave me all these other articles because there's a lot more well, some of them are just blogs, but there's a lot more research now on certain things. And I think even more so, there's going to be even more, like there's an ability for these white papers and studies. So it's really, but it brings it all in one, and it's fantastic. And then it gives you at the bottom, it gives you related queries as well, if you're also interested in some other things. And it does it in like a minute.
Seconds. Would you like me to share
Oh,
not a
do you
live
mind?
search, but I'll share a previous search just to show you how it's different.
Yeah. And
hold up.
And if anybody has any particular questions that you would love us to answer, please put it in the chat. This is meant, as I said, I've sort of changed the format because I really felt that we want to make sure we address specific questions as well going forward. So there we go.
So here's what it looks like. If you just go to the home, this is kind of, it looks like a chat GPT or anything else, but it's specifically focused on search. There is this version's free. There is a pro version which you can pay for, and it has plenty of benefits. But if you create an account, you just you get a lot for free, so you don't actually need to do that right away. So here's one. We recently rebranded our podcast of several years, and one of the overlooked parts of naming things, especially long-standing properties like podcasts, is you end up naming it something that's already in use. So I was trying to do like a search here to see if the original name that we had, which is AI for Entrepreneurs, was in use. So I literally went in there and said, is the name AI for Entrepreneurs in use? I want to name my podcast that, and I'm not sure if I want to make sure I'm not infringing. So here's how it goes. So Google would just give you a lot of this, a lot of links. What Perplexity does is just gives you the answers. It's based on search results and available information. It appears that the phrase AI for Entrepreneurs is in use, but it's not clear if it's trademarked or used as a specific brand name for a product. The phrase AI for Entrepreneurs is mentioned in Business Insider, and then it goes ahead and gives me all these things. It's like pretty revolutionary when it comes to how we search, especially like the way that search has deteriorated. Like half your screen is like paid results, and then it's like how people are ranking, and there's a lot of then geographical depending on where you are. So I really find this useful. You can continue as with anything else. So I went in here and I was like, I found this, can you evaluate? And then it's giving me some information based on that name. It sounds like a very similar version's already in use. And then it suggested I do these things. I asked what if I changed AI for Entrepreneurs podcast to show, then it gave me some feedback on that. This could still see, this is the level of intelligence which I think is not available inside of Google searches right now, right? And this is why AI supercharges it. Like it's giving you a perspective. It's like this could still pose a potential from a trademark perspective. It's not just throwing up information, it's telling you something which requires critical thinking. And then it's going, I'm talking to it now about like, okay, so where would I go if I keep coming up with options and you're saying it's all in use, and help me think. So then now it's helping me think, and then giving me some other directions. So yeah, it's pretty impressive. Definitely recommend putting that into your repertoire, and going there instead of Google a couple of times.
Yeah, amazing, amazing. And I think, one of the things that's come up, and a question is, and I think it's important that we address this, especially for those who are in the HR profession or have businesses and are considering, questions from their clients. The whole issue of people are worried about the privacy aspect and the proprietary aspect and the information. How do I protect it? And I was on an HR professional association session the other day. It was mainly related to IDEA, inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility. And but they did have a chat GPT session at the end. So they are finally starting to get at, like it's time. And they were giving a demonstration, and it came up a lot about protecting that. And so there's a difference between the public and then those ones that are built in-house. And so what are your thoughts on ways to kind of make sure that there are those safeguards in place?
Yeah, I think we've got to think about a couple of layers of this, right? And so you start at the organizational level, and then obviously there's options right now to create a whole lot of no-code stuff using these things. And there is, at a very foundational level, the ability to shut it off. You don't have to train the model on all of your content, right? And so like there was recently a lot of chatter over on LinkedIn about how LinkedIn's automatically putting on the train my AI models thing for everyone, and you actually have to go 3 or 4 levels deep in order to shut it off, so that the AI model is not being trained by your information. And the same thing is possible with all of the tools. So at an organizational level, I think those safeguards and those guardrails would need to be set. I think it's important to have the discussion early because the usage is quite at a base level, it's quite high with individuals. Many people have a ChatGPT or similar on one of their devices, whether on a handheld or on their home computer or whatever. And I think sort of the act of asking it for information, just like how we speak to like our Googles and our Alexas, and even predating all of that, like Siri on the phone, and then Apple's stepped into the ring with like an iPhone, which has this built in. So I definitely think organizations need to start to think about it and say, hey, we better start putting together the frameworks, the guardrails, and the usage or the terms of use for us as a company before it gets to a point where there's security issues and threats and breaches and, oh, you shouldn't have been doing that or whatever else, right, from a reactive perspective. So I think it's definitely important to think about it from there. And then on the personal level, making it available just beyond your workday. I mean, I like to talk about this as it's kind of like you've got a calculator or you've got a computer for the first time, and there's so much possible. I think creating that AI literacy piece, like the way we approached literacy around our finances and literacy around our wellness, this needs to become important.
Yeah, absolutely. I was listening. I was reading something on a post, and they were talking about, because burnout, everybody is overworked, and the whole social media, there's already this like technology angst, and so introducing something else again, and how do you manage that? Because it's supposed to help with productivity versus make us more burnt out because now we have something else to learn. But it's really, I think it kind of links to that reskilling, right? So
Yeah.
there's change is going to be constant. There's always the next, and what makes sense to kind of take the pause in a way to say, well, what are we doing? What can be replaced that doesn't need the human like brain element in a way, the innovation, all of those things. What are those tasks? Like, so for example, on this HR one, they were demonstrating putting together an HR manual. And think about that function. Been trying to get out of the administrative hat for decades, right? So to be more strategic, to be actually working on helping with skills development and helping with the new, the human skills like empathy and relationship building and leadership. And so can we kind of, I know Pam's here and she's never been a policy person anyway. It's like we don't want to be the policy police, but it can be doing it in so quick. And when you think about it, that is something that, again, you don't have to have proprietary names. Like a lot of them end up looking the same when you think about it. But what makes sense for your organization? Do you even need this? And then creating within AI. So one organization I know, they are actually streamlining all their processes, and they're going in and they're saying they're training the AI. They're training, so they have the expertise within us humans to be able to help train the AI for those answers. For like, think about the HR calls that used to come in. Like, what are the things that can be answered? What are the things that really need a human so I can sit across from someone and feel like, I'm getting an answer I need that is more compassionate or something like that. So it's again looking at all those things and what can be done. I'm very curious. I know there's a question in here, but I'm also curious if you have any other things that you've been testing out, feel free to share them. Hilda's asking, in Zoom, can you set it up so that AI companion puts it into writing what is said, not just a summary? Well, there is a
Like a
transcript usually.
transcript.
Yeah.
I think it only offers you two options. It does the summary, and then it does something which is called what's the second option? I can't remember. Is that a
Well, there's an
task?
ask questions, but there is
Ask questions, yeah.
but when you get your recording, you do get a transcript as well.
Oh, do
And you can
you? Okay, yeah.
also
Well,
in the,
yes, then, Hilda.
yeah.
You get the transcript. It comes to you attached with a transcript,
Mhm.
the
Now
summary.
it could
It
be,
goes only to the host, though.
I have a paid account, so maybe that's the difference. I'm not sure. But also I've noticed what people are using, and I've seen this a little bit more, where actually people have their own AI tool. So you'll see that like Pam is there on the screen, and then there's an AI
Yeah,
companion that they're using that's actually recording and getting a transcript. And so we're gonna see that a little bit more
yeah.
going forward, because and that's the beauty. And I think, I mean, there's a few people here that have podcasts, and Susan also has a real cool, like we didn't talk about custom GPTs yet. If anybody's interested, we can go into that. But that's
Can
the
I
thing, is it
comment real
comes so
quick on that?
quickly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it does come so quickly. Sorry, Helen. I want to comment real quick on that documentation piece that you raised over there, which I think is a really important piece, especially for like service-based businesses. There are so many processes and systems that are either like fragmented or not documented or in the head of an employee, or just decisions that you're ending up taking over and over again and depleting like headspace. I think this is a huge like focus area as far as I'm concerned. And, even inside our small businesses, like small business, and I know, the value of your business has a lot to do with how much is actually on paper instead of in your head. I've made a lot of effort over the last year to document things like, whether it's to do with our podcast or the way in which we serve our customers, or, the way in which even the sales process, for example, which I find it's shocking that a lot of people will want marketing to work wonders, and there isn't a clear sales process in place that causes the customers to continuously hear about you and receive offers, right? And so those kind of pieces of documentation is an excellent place to start, at an organizational level, like really putting this down in a way. It's going to massively impact the value of your business. It's going to massively impact your way to, like, hire, keep, train, etc. Your employees. So yeah, definitely something worth
Mhm.
thinking about there.
Yeah, and I also think about if you're doing things like onboarding or any kind of training or videos, and you're doing a long thing, but then you want to break it up into those pieces that are more, bite-sized learning and things like that. I mean, we haven't really talked about the video ones. I haven't really experimented myself. I mean, I think that's something I would definitely delegate with heart.
Yeah, I
I
think
don't want to
so.
be
Yeah.
spending my time trying to figure out how to get little clips from a video. So that's, again, thinking about what you like and what you don't like. But there are a couple of those video tools that would be helpful, but it is really being creative and thinking about it. I think back, again, I've been around for a while, but I used to have the team members like document what they were doing. So you hire someone, they have a job description, and they have like the portfolios that they're accountable for. And then what I would say is, like, it could be different on a day-to-day basis. And I'm not even realizing what you're doing. You're getting calls from other people. How are you spending your time? And so to actually, you're manually doing that. So, but then if you do that, you still have to track those tasks. And then imagine you take that and then you can put it into documentation that for the next person, those standard internal operating procedures, like really what is the role all about? And then how can you help others in the organization, right? So a lot of the knowledge transfer that was an issue when people would leave an organization, no one would know how to do anything. This is a beautiful way to actually get all of that into a system, utilizing AI, chat GPT or anything like that can summarize. So here's another question. How would you suggest we use AI to help to document our processes? Is there an example you might be able to share? Okay, so we kind of touched on that. Do you have a specific one or did that cover it?
I mean, I could send along the one that relates to like our podcast, for example, where we've specifically put it down in terms of like what's the process and what's the descriptions, what are our typical type of episodes, what's the runtime, you know, et cetera, et cetera. There are some others, but they belong to specific clients. But I think the first step is again to just map it out, where you start to like one of the features I enjoy using, which used to be a paid feature, but it's now available to all, is just being able to upload an image or really any format. So I'll just sketch it out. On my iPad, being just a little bit of an overview of like, these are the steps involved currently, and these are the people involved. And then you give it to ChatGPT as an image, and then ask it to break it down into the steps. It will start to give you a bit of shape, and then you'll have to customize it with the things that relate to your flow of work.
Yeah. And again, I think sometimes people are intimidated or worried about uploading their own documents. And you can do that. Like people are using Chat GPT for like full on requests for proposal responses. No, like it's because those can be very tedious. But again, taking out names of things and anything that can be identifying, but
Yes.
it's still going to help you like streamline things that you do regularly. We had social media guidelines. So because I hired interns a lot to get their, certifications, I paid, not unpaid interns. I don't believe in that. But and I would get them, okay, you're doing this. And I know you want to find a full-time job because you're part-time. So I don't want this to be stuck. So they would, create a document that became so long. And I'm like, well, let's take this and piece it apart. And so, okay, here's what's happening in Canva. Here's what you do in, for Instagram. And I mean, that really helps. And then, so what I want to do next is now take that long document, put it in and put it into like different areas, and it'll be output in no time. And I think
And
that that's
very close to accurate, because these kind of things are fairly logic driven, and it's not a lot of creativity that you're expecting from the machine, and it does well with these documentation and outlining asks, and
yeah.
yeah.
And happy to like here's the one thing, it's booking that time in to actually in your calendar. So when I think about calendar management, I have every other week that I don't go into the marketing circle and learn more from the colleagues in Susan's group, I have blocked at the same time, experiment with Chat GPT or whatever I want to do, because I think that's the only way. A lot of times it's hands-on learning. So to actually have those workshops. And there's Canva too, right? Canva's connected to it. And there's, those are the things that, again, there's solopreneurs out there as well. But even for doing a presentation, if you're an HR professional or you're going to be giving a presentation to your clients, it's amazing what you can do. That used to
Yeah, you
take
have
you.
Lavanya had a question there. What can you do in the learning and development modules? This is bringing to mind
Yeah.
an example for me, which is Helen talked about the mastermind that we run, and sort of like the textbook accompaniment to that is we've got like these modules in which I specifically talk about a tool or a technique or a whatever inside of the program. And sometimes it's like it takes me a minute to figure out how to get the same thoughts across in different ways and use cases and examples. And so sometimes I'll just do a free flow back and forth. Like I want to cover this, and this, help me put it together. And so it'll give me some thoughts and it'll ask me things. And then what you can do now with ChatGPT and Canva is you can have it give you like a document, which you take over into Canva, or really you can start from ChatGPT because there are plugins. And then if you paste in a document and ask it to convert it to a presentation, it will, which I find a huge benefit because much prefer Canva's usability and its the aesthetics of the slide options you have. It's just better than in PowerPoint. And if needed, I download it in PowerPoint. But earlier they didn't make things like this easy. You had to copy and paste a little at a time, and it was clunky, at best. So now this is quite impressive. It doesn't mean it's going to show up in the right format that you want, but you're already struggling with a lot less like fiddling with words and readability and size. It's much easier to update the design of a slide than it is to like start and create one. So definitely suggest trying to use that combo for creating learning materials. Yes, Lavanya.
Yeah, so Susan, that really helps. I'm actually using Canva a lot right now. I'm using premium features. I definitely navigated through the panel to understand AI and the new AI features in Canva, but I never happened to see something related to creating presentations using AI. So, is there any feature like that in Canva
Yeah.
right now?
It's if you go into I think it's called Design Studio, and it'll say docs to presentations or docs to something like that. I can send through a screenshot to Helen later because it might take me a minute to find it. But yeah, they don't make it very user friendly. It's already there. It just isn't. It's not very easy to find.
Okay, got it. So we can definitely use the content created through Chat GPT and literally just put that in to create presentations through Canva, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
the difficulty I found, Lavanya, was that we have our own account for Canva, and I was trying to figure out how to connect the two to use my branding. And so I think you have to maybe upload your own branding into Chat GPT because it's got the Canva connection. And then, so there's a little bit, hey, we're already expecting a lot from our AI team member. So keep experimenting, and we'll send you some things, and we can also continue. I mean, I think it's really important to kind of spend some time like experimenting and then getting that help that you need from people that are like a little bit further ahead. I still have a lot to learn. So Hilda has a question. This is great. Thank you for the questions.
Great, thank you. It elaborates a little bit on my first question. I'm taking time in November to diligently work on my book. And I'm a person who, thank you, I'm a person who really can speak my thoughts faster than I can write them. It'll take so long. And so what I'm looking for is something that I can do. So Zoom, I always can speak on. That's why I use that. But is there something else? Essentially, I want to spend 15 minutes essentially dictating and getting the words so then I can edit it. So if Zoom isn't the right thing, I'm open to your suggestions. So that's the question, because I got a November deadline. I'm spending time writing.
Simple is best, especially when your deadline is around the corner. I would say the simplest place to do it is just voice talk into a Google Doc. So you literally go into a new Google document, and then over at the top, let me see if I can tell you the exact path. I think it's under tools. And then if you go down to 3 or 4 from the bottom, there's something called voice typing.
Okay.
And as soon as you turn that on, you'll get a mic on your screen, and then you press that mic, make sure it's on, and then you speak. It'll just literally transcribe in real time. Obviously, there are tools that do this, but I find
That's
that
great,
this
because
the
I have
simplest.
Google.
This is the
Thank
simplest.
you.
Do you have Google?
Google
Yeah.
Drive.
So just go ahead and do it that way. I think it's the fastest.
For sure.
But if you do feel like you want to record it at the same time, you can also turn on your Zoom, because that could be
The
running.
point is to get the words down of what I said. And
Yes, then this is the best way to do it.
thank you kindly.
Yeah, I also use my phone recording, and then I send it to like Otter AI or Sonics AI, and it'll record the transcript. I mean, there's a fee for that. So that's the thing, is if there's something that doesn't cost, but you know, the record function on the phone's always a good thing too. Oh, good luck with the book. And speaking of that, I know we're almost wrapping up, so this has been great. I want to make sure that any questions, people are dropping off, so I'm going to quickly do this. I have my Blue Jays hat. I went to the game last night. And people that signed up and things, I'm just doing it. I put the names in here. So someone's going to win Susan's book, and I'm going to, Monica, I don't think she made it. So I'm going to pick, I think, one more. And then Tara's here, I think, still. So I will reach out to let you know when get your information for Susan's Unboring book. So I really, really just wanted to take a moment, and we can stay on for a couple to answer any more questions, but to formally thank Susan for this and for everyone showing up. It has been wonderful to see you here. I really would love to do this again sometime if people are interested to kind of continue to explore more and deepen, reach out to Susan, because she is really the one with the expertise that I'm learning from. Although I feel like it's sort of funny because I never thought I'd be at this point where I'm like enjoying this so much because I have never been a techie person. So it's been fun, and it's just more about really freeing up time to then be able to do the things we really love, right? And I mean, you can use it for like your grocery lists and your preparing your itinerary for travel and all these other things. So any other last burning questions before we go? I do want to be mindful of everybody's time. And again, Susan, I so appreciate you spending this time with us today
Thank you
and
for
giving
having me,
us
Helen.
some of your knowledge.